Crash and Burn.
Hey everybody. So tonight I am going to be discussing Johnny Cash's 1975 book, Man in Black. Now this, at first glance, you would assume perhaps that it was ghostwritten to a degree. Like Anthony Kiedis got, I can't remember the guy's name. It was like Harry Plowman or something to help him write Scar Tissue. And Manson employed, I think it was Peter Strauss from Rolling Stone, if I'm not mistaken, to help him write his book way back. But this was written by Cash by himself. He talks about it in the introduction, how he thanks everybody who helped him, like who would be endlessly willing to help him edit and re-edit as he would be rewriting this and writing this and rewriting this and whatnot while he was on the road. And I don't know, this is incredible. Like, I mean, we know Johnny Cash is an incredible songwriter, but just overall, the man is a strong writer. Like, he can write, like, I mean, despite the fact that he is very easily, I suppose, writing the story of his life, nevertheless, he makes it an easy and engaging read, much like Amanda Palmer's The Art of Asking. It's like that woman, that book just felt so effortless, and it just flowed so well, and that's exactly what this book has going. But yeah, I mean, this tells his story right from the jump. Now, for anybody that doesn't know, Johnny Cash was born way back when, and he unfortunately lost his brother Jack, I believe, when Johnny was around 12. His brother was going to work that Saturday to get $3 because Johnny's family, they weren't the richest, of course. And $3 was a lot of money, and he was going to build fence posts in like some little like shop somewhere. And everybody in his family, Johnny and Johnny's parents and Jack's parents, they didn't want him to go. Everybody had a bad feeling about Jack going off to work that day. And Jack, like Johnny tried to get him to go fishing, and I can't remember, his mom tried to get him to stay home for some reason, and he wouldn't. He said he was taking off and he was going to go work. And what happened was while he was cutting fence posts, he was pulled into the table saw, and he was sliced more or less in half. The doctors were able to save his life somewhat. He was in surgery forever. They came out of surgery saying that there's really no hope for him. He's going to hold on for as long as he does. And I'm not 100%, but I think he lasted about a week. I mean, it's in the book. It's just now I can't recall it because, my God, there is a ridiculous amount of information in this book. But yeah, so his brother ended up getting sepsis. It moved into his bloodstream, and then he died. But right before he did die, and this, my God, does this give me hope? Just before he died, he said that he could hear angels and he could see heaven. And he kept asking his mom, who was at his bedside, like, "Can you hear the angels? Can you see heaven?" And then he passed away. So maybe there is a heaven. God, fingers crossed that I get into that thing. You know, please, God, if you're up there, just let me in, please. But anyways, yeah. So I thought that was a really sort of nice way for things to end for his brother, who died unfortunately young. Way too young. And then Cash enrolls in he enrolls in the Air Force. I believe it was like 1949 or 1950, and this is where he was introduced to alcohol. And he was really into music, needless to say, because this is, of course, Johnny Cash. And somebody told him to enroll, and I think it was Keegan's School of Broadcasting, and he did, so that he could get to work at a local radio station where, when he was lucky, he would get to DJ. Because again, music. Cash was in love with the Bible from the time he was a kid. He loved singing hymns and everything, and hymns remained a huge part of Cash's life pretty much right up until he died, I'm pretty sure. He maintained his faith. So he got to DJ here and there. And then, of course, it started the way it would. Like, he started singing at church. And then, interestingly enough, he's known, of course, as the Man in Black. And the title of the book is The Man in Black. And the reason that he started wearing all black originally back when he was a kid, because he said that black would be better for church anyways. So him and whoever would play a show, and then they'd have to get to church. So it would just be easier if he was to wear black. And he said that even now, of course, now being the book came out in 1975, he says that even now when people ask me, "Why do you always wear black?" I still say, because black is better for church. And it's just incredible. So he ends up getting signed to Sun Records, who didn't want him initially. Sun Records, they weren't like super impressed with him. Hang on for a second. I'm kind of lost myself here. He meets Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records, and wasn't super impressed. But then Johnny just kept knocking Sun Records' door down. And it got to the point where Phillips was like, "All right, fine, let's see what you got." And because at that point it seemed like Cash was focusing mainly on religious tunes and Sun Records wasn't really looking for that. But inevitably, he broke down Sam Phillips. Phillips saw his talent. He signs him to Sun Records. And this is like the coolest story. So he is hanging out with, Sam Phillips is hanging out and he's singing a song that Cash is writing. And then Elvis comes in, as in Presley, and he starts playing the piano. And they're all kind of jamming and shit. And Phillips is like, "Oh, guys," he's like, "you know what? Since I have both of you here," he's like, "I just signed somebody to Sun Records who I think is going to be really big. Guys, this is Jerry Lee Lewis." And he introduces Johnny Cash to Jerry Lee Lewis like that. And in addition to Jerry Lee Lewis, Johnny Cash also speaks about how eventually, he would meet Roy Orbison, who was also signed to Sun Records. And he said that Roy was like one of the most super people he'd ever met. And of course, he would go on to become like an international superstar because it was Roy Orbison. The other thing that I like about that is Johnny Cash name drops Roy Orbison and Danzig, for anybody that cares, as in Danzig from the Misfits and Samhain and his band Danzig. He wrote a song for Johnny Cash as well as he wrote a song for Roy Orbison. So I thought that was a really nice touch too for me personally, because it's a way for me to sort of connect with this book on a personal level. Because even though I've loved Johnny Cash since I was a kid, it's more like when Danzig comes into things, I'm really going to start paying attention because I fucking love Danzig. So I thought that was amazing too. What else did I want to say about this? He played his first major show with Elvis Presley in 1955. And there's this one time, I can't remember exactly when it was, he was hanging out with Carl Perkins. And they were waiting for Elvis to come off stage. My God, this story is crazy. And they were joking about their shoes. And I think Johnny had mistakenly stepped on Perkins' shoes or something. Perkins made a joke about, don't step on my shoes. These are made of suede. And Cash was like, "They're not fucking suede shoes. They're like Air Force regulation boots. Get over yourself, bud." And then Perkins sort of wised up and he was like, "You know what? I think there's a song there." And Cash inspired him. You should, if you think there's a song there, you should write the song. And so in front of Johnny Cash, on the side of the stage where him and Carl Perkins were both waiting for Elvis Presley to finish and come off, Perkins grabbed a piece of paper, and by the time Elvis had actually walked off stage, Carl Perkins had written "Blue Suede Shoes" in front of Johnny. I almost said Johnny Depp, in front of Johnny Cash. And it was just like that. He also comes across, he meets Charlie Pride, too, Johnny Cash, one night, promises, while he's incredibly intoxicated on amphetamines, promises to get Charlie Pride into the Grand Ole Opry. But see, the problem was, Cash was all banged up on pills. Cash what happened was one night he was moving from A to B, he was getting kind of tired. Somebody who was in the car with him said, "Hey, take a couple of these diet pills. I use them to perk me up." And that was how Cash ended up being introduced to amphetamines, which would pretty much just destroy his life. He'd start out taking 2, and by the end, and when everything was really rough, by the mid to late 60s, he was popping like 100 a day. So anyways, he promises Charlie Pride that he can get him into the Grand Ole Opry, but the thing was, Johnny Cash had already quietly been asked not to come back to the Grand Ole Opry, because a couple years prior, he was all banged up on pills, and he went to grab the mic off the mic stand, and because he was all wired, the slightest thing would set him off, and he couldn't get the mic off, and he ripped it out, and I think the mic stand dropped awkwardly somehow, and it smashed a bunch of those stage lights, and they shattered all over the audience. And that was it. The people at the Grand Ole Opry were like, "Listen, Cash, we appreciate you and everything, but we don't want you coming around here anymore." So he signals back to that. He's like, "Fuck, I just promised Charlie Pride I can get him into the Grand Ole Opry, and I can't get myself into the Grand Ole Opry." Ooh, that's going to be a bit of a problem. So that was cool that he also knows Charlie Pride. I mean, at one point he's hanging out with Mike Nesmith from the Monkees. And Mike warns him. He's like, "Cash, be careful. Fame is fleeting." And the coolest thing, I think, well, one of the coolest things in this book is when he finally proposed to June Carter. He proposed to her on stage during one of their shows, and of course, in front of an audience. So he completely puts her on the spot. But the coolest thing was he proposed to her in London, Ontario. I mean, I've been to London, Ontario. It's a ways off from here, but I have been there. And that's where Johnny Cash proposed to June Carter. And of course she said yes. And then the first song that they sung together is sort of a newly engaged couple was, if I were a carpenter and you were a lady, would you marry me anyways? Would you have my baby? Fuck, I love that song. But yeah, that is like this whole book. And it's dripping with authenticity. Johnny Cash doesn't hide anything. He is completely transparent about his crippling drug addiction to amphetamines and Benzies, and how, like, it was through the grace of God, literally, and June Carter and her family who moved into his house to help him clean up. And then he did, of course, relapse, and there's an incredibly sad story in here. It's on page 139. Bear with me here. I'm a professional, so I marked the pages. Where are we here? Yeah, so he's arrested by the cop, and when he's being released, the cop is giving him his illegally procured amphetamines. And Cash is like, these are illegal, aren't they? And he says, you're right, they are illegal, but I don't care. Take them. Go home and kill yourself. And Cash is like, Jesus, dude. And I quote, the cop says, I followed your career for over 10 years. My wife and I have every record you've ever made. We love you. We've always loved you. We've watched you on television, listened for you on the radio. We've got your albums of hymns. We're probably the 2 biggest fans you've ever had. It broke my heart when they brought you in here last night. I left the jail and went home to my wife and told her that I had Johnny Cash locked up. I almost wanted to resign and just walk out because it was such a heartbreaking thing for me. And he slapped the pills on the desk and he said, now go. And that was it for Johnny Cash. He stopped doing drugs. And I mean, that is pretty powerful. I mean, that hurts just reading it now. Like, that must have been really, really hard to hear, that, like, from a cop who arrested you, was like a super fan, and his heart was broken because he had to arrest you because he had so much respect for you. Fuck. But yeah, so the book is absolutely amazing. There's a bunch of fun pictures inside as well. But I think my favorite thing is how the book ends. And the book ends with he's flying over. He realizes that his plane is flying over the cemetery where his brother Jack is buried. And he says, he looks down at that little cemetery plot fading back into the horizon. And I smiled and whispered, hey, Jack, I'm still singing those hymns you and I loved so much. I'll do a couple of them tonight on the show in New York. And he says, and by the way, I'll see you later, Jack. And the thing that's kind of crazy now is Jack and him and his parents and June Carter and her parents and everybody, they're all together because unfortunately they've all passed away. So it's kind of nice. It's cool that he ended the book like that in 1975, but here we are in 2024 and they're all dead and gone. So God willing, they're all up in heaven making really fun music together, because that's the type of shit I like to think about. But yeah, this book was amazing. If you have the opportunity to find this, I picked this up at Talese for like $4. God damn, it was so worth it. This is an amazing book. If you love Johnny Cash, this is like an absolute must read. He has written a few books. Of course, this is the only one I've managed to get my hands on. And that is where I'm going to leave it. So like always, thank you so much for hanging out with me for way too long. Oh my God, pushing 15 minutes today while I discuss Johnny Cash's 1975 book, Man in Black. Like always, if you like this review, or you like this book, or you love Johnny Cash, don't forget to go and do something nice for somebody. And remember that simple hold the door for somebody, or give $1 to charity the next time you're at Walmart. I mean, I know they use it as a tax write-off, but that's implied. Walmart's scum. Give the $1 anyways. It'll make it to the Red Cross. But most importantly, like always, never forget that the world is actually a better place because you are in it, and no matter whatever the fuck it is you're going through, just don't let go, because it's going to get better and you're going to start to feel like you again at some point. All right, I'm gone. Have a good night.